drama, there's a story we're overlooking.
I'm here to offer you, as these are, an opportunity to know the truth so that if you can connect with it at any level, then you might survive.
Millions of stories, in fact. Stories that scream for immediate attention, yet continue to be muffled by the cacophony of the latest drama or trend.
Mother is the divine mother of all mothers. No mother ever existed before mother. So why would mother take a backseat to any earth human mother? She wouldn't.
Let's take a moment to step back from the online spectacle and face the harrowing truth. Human trafficking and destructive cults are not just issues in distant lands or plot lines in crime shows. They are among the most severe and rapidly growing problems happening right under our noses.
Max Striker is a YouTuber and filmmaker, dedicating his life and his work to empowering children. Specifically, he seeks to empower children who have suffered the worst that humanity has to offer, and has been deeply involved with this mission for nearly half a decade now. Years ago, when channels on the site began to perform their own Chris Hansen interventions for content, it would be a wildly successful genre, just like the original Dateline series was, both on television and years later online. Hunters would catfish the scum of our societies and confront them with the truth, often forcing them to humiliate themselves for their sins. It was a genre that I didn't like, not because the targets didn't deserve it, but for the social anxiety it seemed to evoke in me, as well as the off feeling you get when you begin to wonder how involved law enforcement was. Max wasn't like the others, though. Max would target platforms and the sinful users of them, collecting solid evidence and passing it on to federal and local authorities, leading to disgusting prowlers looking to prey on our most vulnerable behind bars where they belong.
All we had was his face and his voice.
Right.
And out of that, I said, find him. And then within 24 hours, we found him. And then I started social engineering all of his friends to give me his information. And they did. I don't know if the police asked him to come back or he went on his own volition or they forced him to come back. I don't know any of those details. I just know he went back to Canada and was in police custody for a certain amount of time.
His work would be a mix of fact and fiction, with a setting that elicited both shock and catharsis for those who have gone through similar trauma. Having been on the platform for years, his content would become increasingly risky as YouTube began to crack down on graphic themes and morally questionable content, seeking to avoid the loss of revenue that comes with controversy and poor optics. As they stepped on the necks of visually disturbing and dark content, as well as the creep hunting genre for those not using law enforcement, Max would look to further empower his now solid and almost rabid audience of survivors. His growing fan base came along with a growing reputation and level of respect from his peers and detractors alike. He established close friendships with some of the biggest creators on the platform, giving him a level of credibility that some worked for years to achieve. And Max would leverage this credibility in 2022 after his video exposing the social media platform IMVU as a haven for cretins was struck down by YouTube. Max would gather testimonies from dozens of creators in the commentary, dark investigation, and true crime spaces, looking to send a message to YouTube that their strict but vague guidelines were protecting those who sought to claim the innocence of others for their own sick agenda. Pick a Side would be a wild success, stirring conversation across many social media platforms, and ultimately, Max's original video wouldn't be restored, but an altered version would be uploaded later, receiving a moderate amount of success regardless. He would be given access to a YouTube manager to voice his experiences to, looking to help guide the terms of service not only for himself, but for many other creators who weren't so lucky. It was a successful campaign, and while some railed against his method for the obvious apocalyptic risk that came with such actions, his reputation was only solidified as a man with a passion and a heart that was in the right place. Then Max got back to work, doing what he does best. When Max emerged from his production cycle in late 2023, he sought to aim his sword at not only a single target, but the rising number of cults forming in every corner of the internet. The tactics deployed by these underground organized collectives were recruiting young and naive victims by the hundreds. He consulted cult experts, did deep dives into the risk of AI being used as a tool for recruitment, and screamed to his fellow creators to help him fight this battle. But this time, no one was listening. Max was a vigilante, a soldier for vulnerable children, and a hero. Till he wasn't.
This might be the biggest collapse of a channel in YouTube history, where the person's entire brand is a lie.
He's a complete fraud. He has faked videos, lied about arrests he's made, mishandled investigations so poorly he actually helps the predators get away.
This guy 100% deserves everything that's coming his way. At the moment, in terms of loss of support and people being critical of him, despicable. Like, they're utterly despicable actions.
But in this situation, this creator specifically that we are talking about is MamaMax.
Max Striker is a complete and total fraud. His persona MamaMax is a freak who does not help children prosecute their abusers. He hunts predators online as a soldier of fortune. He lies about his accomplishments to bolster his credibility.
You're a clout chasing just another YouTuber. You're no different than anybody else. You don't give a rat's ass, and you can suck my dick.
I've been an audience member of a lot of YouTube niche corners, from history and science to obscure lolcow documentarians. With YouTube being almost my sole source of entertainment, I've consumed a lot of content over the last decade. True crime clearly is my favorite, but to confess something that I'm not really sure is going to be taken well, YouTube commentary might be my number 2. From large creators like Critical and Mudahar to smaller channels like Willie Mac Show, Chud Logic, Tommy C, and Nicholas Diorio. Say what you will about my character, but I find it all quite entertaining and have been engaged by the subjects for years now. Some of these creators are critical to the public discourse, and integral to the self-policing that YouTube creators as a whole should be engaging with. And occasionally, these figures become far more than just drama gossip channels, and make a real change for the better when one of us turns out to be a snake. One of the things that connects a viewer to a creator is the recently coined parasocial connection. It is a unidirectional relationship that forms between creators like myself, a personality sharing my opinions and perspective, and the viewer who experiences that content. The issue with this connection is that I may never interact with you, therefore I may never establish the two-way relationship that human psychology has been utilizing for 100,000 years. And while some creators are upfront about this kind of thing, others will potentially use that connection and one-way trust for less than savory means. It's one of the reasons that I'm so anxious about ensuring that the information that I relay to you is accurate, because any corrections are likely to be missed, and your trust in my telling of these stories is something I do not take lightly. For Max to come out swinging about influencers and content creators being cult leaders, taking shots in ChatGPT threats and other YouTubers and private messages, and to be so maligned that he attempted to cancel the platform's largest commentator simply for not responding to his walls of in-character texts, was extremely ironic. Not simply because of the obvious fervor of his modern audience resembling that of a new religious movement, but for the tactics he used to build his platform in the first place. Before he stumbled into the dark investigation niche of the website, joining other creators like Nexpo and Barely Sociable, he was something of a life advice channel. He had a fairly creative venting/life advice from a teenager series called Life Sucks, featuring animations made by his sister. These videos would get him his initial foundation, and the way he interacted with this small following was about as parasocial as you can get.
Thank you guys so much. Love you. Love you guys. I probably say that too much. I say it all the time, but I seriously do love you guys. Y'all are my friends, for real. And I really do love you guys, so there's that.
So once he became the vigilante of the creep hunting space on YouTube, he was able to build one of the platform's most loyal and supportive core audiences, setting Max up at one point with a minimum of $15,000 a month in Patreon support, strong credibility and an air of respect among his peers, and admiration of surface-level viewers like myself. And then it all came down on his head when it was revealed in a matter of days that Max was not only a total fraud, but also a vindictive, ego-driven person who would go as far as to character assassinate his close friends behind their backs for seemingly no reason at all.
Look, if it was me being paid 10 to 15 grand a month on Patreon to hunt predators for a living, I personally would feel compelled to share the revelation that I lived inside of a predator's guest bedroom rent-free. What I wouldn't do is wait until I moved out and then spread a rumor about him privately amongst his friends as a form of gossip.
Over the course of this year, MamaMax and the facade that he built began to crumble rapidly, as his most recent crusade against cults turned out to be a clout-driven crusade against his fellow creators. One by one, his weak foundations would give way, exposing him as an egomaniacal fraud. At no point in his vigilante work did he make any real impact, despite claiming the exact opposite until the truth was too loud to ignore. At this point, there's a plethora of information on Max Striker and his time on YouTube. It's been told over and over by creators who are much better at this than I am, but I'm unsure how much crossover my audience will have to the one that is plugged into events like this. It's a story that has been told as a cautionary tale of ego and clout-driven motivations, but to me, it sparked a curiosity about the state of the world and an individual's ability to collect a hive mind without ever speaking face to face with someone. If you're interested in the entire saga, I'll put a few great videos in the description. I was a big fan of Max. I supported his Patreon for a time because I thought he was a talented kid making an impact and presenting it in the most unique way that I'd ever seen. I have watched his downfall take place, both shocked by my own naivety in falling for his facade, and that of some of the most respected creators on the platform also falling victim to his lies. The parasocial connection that I established as an intermediate audience member blinded me to the obvious moral fallacies and clear deception in Max's work and mission. And with his crusade against cults, it really got me wondering. We like to think that we'd never fall into the clutches of a cult, but can you really trust yourself? As we grow up, we look to several figures for guidance and education. As a blank slate, we're required to engage in the trial and error of life, and if you're lucky, there's at least one adult that takes their responsibilities seriously. In my case, I was fortunate enough to have my mother, who had me when she was just 18 years old. As an adult now, it's clear that she also had no idea what she was doing, but it turned out all right. We look to others for everything from how we navigate social situations right down to how we think our thoughts. Logic and reasoning are established early, and the crucial years we live in the first decade of our lives will go on to shape every decade that we're blessed enough to experience. Unfortunately, many of us go through traumas that can derail everything. Trauma that sets us up for failure from the starting line. Flaws and cracks in our self-esteem and ability to reason for ourselves can open us up to some nefarious, sociopathic and malignant characters to take advantage of those weaknesses. While we like to think we know ourselves inside and out in a way that we can never fall prey to thought control and outlandish ideas, many smart and well-adjusted people have fallen into the clutches of new age and religious groups that go on to do anything from fleece their bank accounts to influence them to commit heinous crimes. There are plenty of large, notable, and deeply well-documented cults that have made newspaper headlines throughout our modern age. Charles Manson and Jim Jones are likely to stand out among the most notorious, and the exponential pain and suffering that they have caused is immeasurable. But today, I want to look into some lesser-known groups with outlandish beliefs and ideas that perhaps you haven't heard of before. Their sinister story can reach well beyond the cinematic horror of other cults throughout recent history, and the most disturbing part about them may be the cautionary tales that they relay. Whether you're logically grounded or in a broken and dark place, you too could be vulnerable to falling into the rabbit holes of thought control and despair that follow in their wake.
This was David Koresh when we first met him in an exclusive interview back in 1987. At the time, he was known as Vernon Howe, and he was involved in a deadly dispute for control of the Branch Davidian sect. Even then, his enemies were saying this self-proclaimed son of God was closer to Satan.
Cult-like tactics are utilized by nearly everyone, from social media influencers to advertising companies to religious entities. You could make a compelling case for nearly any large celebrity that their fan base is a cult of their own. If you want to join the Hawk and Load cult, comment "All Hail Lemmy" and tweet me pictures of your dogs. That'll make it official. Also, make sure you're subscribed too while you're at it. In more recent years, the term new religious movement has been utilized after the word cult caught a bad rap with Jonestown, the Manson family, and Scientology. Wait, Heaven's Gate. Cults have a storied history in cultures all over the world as vulnerable followers tread behind their charismatic leaders to their detriment. Cults in the United States have existed for centuries. As far back as the 18th century, groups like the Shakers came over from England just 2 years before the country declared its independence. But to define something as a cult in reality requires the meeting of a particular set of criteria. Some, if not all, of the following: charismatic leadership, isolation, exclusive beliefs or practices, control, manipulative and unethical behavior, exploitation, high demands, and harmful practices. In sociological and psychological fields, cult has been used with both positive and negative connotations, but colloquially, it's certainly a derogatory term. The victims of organizations like this can come from any walk of life and any kind of background. Typically, one would be undergoing some major life crisis or transition, having an internal struggle that a charismatic leader will offer a solution to. Once they get in, it's a gradual process of isolation and control, literally reinstalling the software that the victim's brain runs for logical processing. Some of the smartest and most well-off among us fall prey to groups like this. And in the end, and with hindsight, it seems obvious to outsiders. But even once the victim awakes from their thought control, they require extensive and specialized therapeutic practice to give them some semblance of normal life back. No one is safe from life's challenges, and in turn, they are also not immune to falling into the clutches of another human, looking to twist and bend their psychology for the sake of power, money, or gratification. And just because a group doesn't reach a violent crescendo, like in the case of the Branch Davidians in Waco or Charles Manson and the family, doesn't mean you can't take away a valuable lesson from telling their stories.
And more than 100 San Diegans are preparing for the end of the world.
They are part of a growing movement of those who believe a Mayan prophecy predicts the end of days on December the 21st. 10 News reporter Natasha Zuvez delves into the secretive community of San Diegans who call themselves preppers.
In the American 1950s, as I've said many times before, the country was in a post-war utopia of economic stability and rapidly evolving culture and technology. The American dream took its form from this era of prosperity, and many households were staunchly religious, upholding a rigid moral structure. Early in the decade, Dorothy Martin, a Chicago housewife, would begin to form her own odd structure of beliefs. Believing that she had been endowed with the ability to pick up and decode transmissions from some off-world entity, she began to perform automatic writing sessions, where she would put these foreboding and astonishing messages on paper, allowing her to spread the word to others around her. While there was no official founding of the Seekers, Dorothy, under the moniker Sister Thedra, would attract a small group of followers who believed her gift was genuine. They would have frequent meetings at Martin's Chicago home and hold these automatic writing sessions often, attempting to piece together the messages being sent to them by extraterrestrial beings from the planet Clarion. These otherworldly figures would provide Dorothy and her small following spiritual guidance, leading to a growing faith and religious structure that would begin to form within their group. But these extraterrestrial gurus would also send messages of apocalyptic prophecies, leading to a growing interest in their message. Eventually, a date for a great flood would be handed down to the Seekers during their automatic writing sessions. On December 21st, 1954, the Earth would be set to suffer a great flood, not unlike the biblical reset of the human race. The Seekers believed that they would not only survive, but be collected by the Clarion race of beings in a flying saucer and taken to a new life among the stars. As the date of their apocalypse began to draw near, their growing numbers and grim message would attract media attention, bringing the Seekers to a wider public, to be mocked and laughed at like a freak show. But it also brought it to the attention of a trio of social psychologists, Leon Festinger, Henry Riken, and Stanley Schachter. When it came to their attention that a group of locals was part of an apocalyptic doomsday cult, they saw it as an opportunity to infiltrate the small but welcoming group of followers. They saw it as a unique chance to study the manifestation and effects of cognitive dissonance, which refers to the psychological stress experienced by a person who holds two or more contradictory beliefs ideas, or values. They were interested in how a group of people could hold on to their beliefs so vehemently in the face of clear and provable contradictory evidence. The infiltration and study would take place in late 1954, just before the world was set to suffer the flood. Festinger's interest was particularly piqued by what would happen when the prophecy failed to come true. His study focused on how the group members coped with the disconfirmation of their beliefs. On the evening of December 20th, 1954, the seekers gathered, awaiting the impending flood and gleefully anticipating their rescuers. But, of course, nothing happened. Dorothy and the seekers were perplexed that their prophecy did not come to be, then slumped back to their homes, wondering if perhaps they were misguided or forgotten. However, a new message would come to Dorothy shortly after, informing her and the seekers that their faith and belief in the prophecy spared the planet from the Great Flood, meaning their rescue was not needed. Dorothy's automatic readings, her followers, and the seekers as a whole would morph and change, effectively at her whim. They would rename themselves to the Brotherhood of the Seven Rays and alter their beliefs to a more esoteric tone, in a fitting turn for their dwindling numbers and media attention. Leon Festinger would go on to publish his book When Prophecy Fails in 1956, showing the world the experience of the Seekers and how they dealt with their lack of apocalypse. The work would go on to be a major example for explaining cognitive dissonance and how it manifested in the real world. Dorothy would spend the rest of her life with a small following and evolving belief system, eventually fading into American history as just another crackpot who contributed to the cultural consciousness when it came to how the country viewed cults and crazy UFO collectives. Ultimately, the story of the Seekers in relation to other cults in American history is actually very tame, and it likely wouldn't even qualify in today's standard for harmful cults. Everywhere we look, there are evildoers in the dark looking to violate the tenets we hold sacred and harm the innocents we all band together to protect. And as such, we become hyper-vigilant as we read headline after headline about Lucifer's infiltration into our communities, and suddenly, our neighbors begin to look a little more suspicious. This is the story of Satanic Panic. In the late 1980s, at a park in Tallahassee, Florida, 6 small children, malnourished and dirty, were observed by a concerned citizen. They were all between the ages of 2 and 6 years old, and their disheveled appearance raised concern that something amiss was happening to them. They were chaperoned by 2 adult men, well-dressed in suits and mysteriously positioned, prompting the observer to contact law enforcement for a welfare check. The men were vague and evasive with police, so an arrest was performed and local services took in the children, as an investigation into the dismal state of them and the mysterious intent of the men was conducted. Under interrogation, the men were apprehensive with their stories. They mentioned their affiliation with a group that lived communally and had unconventional practices. It was deduced that the men were transporting the children to a special school in Mexico for youth with brilliant minds. Observations of the children, however, found that they were covered in dirt and insect bites, confused and developmentally delayed, and appeared to be unfamiliar with technology, which raised red flags for social workers and law enforcement. It was clear that something was going on, and that these children were not raised in a normal family environment. When I did my video on Satanic Panic, I originally wanted to feature the Finders, a group of communal living individuals with unconventional beliefs and practices. Their media attention was at the height of things like the McMartin preschool trial, and they were quickly connected to satanic activity. The culture around their discovery was mostly to blame for that connection, and no real evidence of satanic practices was ever presented. That's why I held on to them for this video. The FBI became involved given the sensitive nature of the situation with the 6 children and the men in suits. Material seized from the men, along with some of the information that they did manage to provide, led law enforcement to a group that operated mainly out of Washington, D.C. and Virginia, known as the Finders. The Finders was a group of incredibly secretive people, causing a sensational media circus painting them with their satanic panic. The Finders were founded sometime around the late 60s or early 70s by Marion Petty, and as I mentioned previously, they operated out of a few properties, mainly in Washington, D.C. The men arrested in the park incident would be brought up on charges. However, no conclusive evidence was able to be drawn, leading to the men being set free and the children returned to the Finders' custody. Very little information is known about what happened to the group after that. With the group on both the public and FBI's radar, Later searches of the finder's property after warrants were issued would turn up some very disturbing writings and photographs. A photo album titled The Execution of Henrietta and Igor would be acquired by federal law enforcement and would feature several graphic and troubling photos. One of these photos depicted children being present for the slaughtering of a pair of goats, and when asked to explain themselves, they would state,
"As long as we have existed, there have been allegations against us on many topics because people don't understand us and strike out against us. We had 2 goats there in the summer, and rather than just leave them there to starve in the winter, we butchered and ate them. We did it with the children present because we thought it would be a good learning experience for them. It turned out to be a very delightful experience for them."
There would be plenty of allegations from the media and the public of satanic ritual abuse, but extensive investigations from both local and federal branches of law enforcement turned up no substantive evidence of anything but the finders simply being an unorthodox group living an alternative lifestyle. Ultimately, no substantial evidence of any criminal activity would be acquired, and as the satanic panic lifted from the American cultural consciousness, the finders would be left to live their unorthodox ways, facing the obvious stigma they had faced since their founding. Nothing nefarious would be proven, and in the end, they were simply a commune of oddballs with a religious practice that few were able to understand or connect with. In late 2019, the FBI would release hundreds of documents related to the finders, offering a deeper look into the evidence that they collected, noting that it was the most requested release from the FBI vault. Conspiracies and theories of government involvement would fester and spread as the internet grew communities, and with how secretive the group was and the shocking nature of the information that did end up in the public eye, that comes to no surprise. They would ultimately fade back into obscurity, only resurfacing when YouTubers want to tell stories about cults. So there you go.
And is now brainwashing members. Now, Mother God says she can do surgery with her hands, talk to the dead, and has reincarnated more than 500 times.
The stories that we've covered so far contain some unsettling information, but ultimately are devoid of both technology and tragedy. Looking at groups and situations like Waco or the Manson family, a sensational view of cult activity tends to come to the forefront when the subject is discussed. It's easy for us to think that we wouldn't be drawn in by such terrible groups. But their stories happen gradually, and if you dive into the psychology of it all, you're sure to become a little less trusting of yourself. Anyone here watching this video will be at least somewhat familiar with the internet, its evolution, and the technologies that we use to connect to it. We have the entirety of human knowledge in our pocket at every minute of every day, rivaled only by the amount of information that is completely fabricated or misinterpreted. Tools that allow us to connect with one another, stimulating the social mechanisms we've evolved with. Amy Carlson was born on November 30th, 1975. While the information on her childhood and early life is scarce, it's believed that she had a fairly typical upbringing and home life. In a 2023 HBO documentary about her story, her parents relayed that she was a bright student and lived a typical Southern upbringing in Dallas, Texas. Amy was the mother to 3 children with as many marriages and was an otherwise unremarkable healthcare worker throughout her young adulthood. Later on, I also read that she was working at McDonald's when she abandoned her children, so. But in the early 2000s, with the growing popularity of the internet, she began to express and foster an interest in New Age spiritual ideas and became an avid user of forums discussing them, making for a haunting breadcrumb trail leading all the way to her death. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Amy became a fixture of an online forum of a group called Lightworkers, hosting and engaging with other souls looking to expand their minds, exercise their beliefs, and ultimately evolve the human experience. By the mid-aughts, she would begin to describe to her fellow forum users her supernatural experiences. In particular, events like a disembodied voice coming to her and telling her that she'd one day become the President of the United States. She would fall fairly quickly into these stories and experiences, feeling so strongly about them that she would suddenly leave her entire life behind to head off on a journey of discovery and a life of unrestricted spiritual practice. She would leave behind her 3rd husband and all of her children to start a new life with Amaranth White Eagle, a fellow forum netizen and one of the most important components of where her life would end up. White Eagle and Carlson collected in Colorado, starting a YouTube channel and posting daily spiritual content in 2009, under the banner of the Galactic Free Press. Carlson would accrue a small but dedicated following, and as the years progressed, she would dub her following the Galactic Federation of Light, officially establishing her new religious movement. The group's theology was a fluid combination of esoteric ideas, new and old world religion, and spirituality. With Carlson taking on the moniker Mother God, a name that she was given by White Eagle, who in turn would serve as the group's first father god, the foundation of the group would be set. With their combination of deep spiritual ideas and utilization of technology and social media, they managed to grow their numbers with a bulk of followers doing so remotely. Sometime later, the group would rebrand with their most infamous title, LoveHasWon. Prior to 2013, Carlson and her content didn't feature her on camera. As things began to get moving for her and her following, the relationship with Father God would end after he ran off with another woman he met on the Lightworker forums in much the same way he had with Carlson. Soon after, she would meet and move in with Miguel Lamboy, with him being named the group's new Father God. As these titles would suggest, Carlson and her believers were convinced that she was the manifested form of God. The group's beliefs mirror many other New Age religious movements, like Heaven's Gate, incorporating elements of spirituality, religion, and extraterrestrial involvement. As her sermons and messages were disseminated via her YouTube channel, she began to attract many in-person followers, establishing the beginnings of their communal lifestyle and Carlson's hold over both the thoughts and pockets of her worshippers. By 2018, the group had a sizable amount of both on and offline membership, with the group beginning to attract media attention both for their outlandish ideas and Carlson's charismatic control over her flock of sheep. They would register LoveHasWon as both a 501c3 nonprofit as well as an LLC as the group began to open online businesses, selling an array of spiritual items. Among these items, the group would distribute colloidal silver. Colloidal silver is typically a water-based solution containing tiny particles of silver, meant for ingestion as an alternative medicine. Carlson and LoveHasWon was not the first or only group to believe in the silver's effects, and it's fairly common among New Age groups like them. In many of these religious systems, silver is believed to have holistic and spiritual benefits and metaphysical properties. It's sometimes associated with purity, clarity, and a connection to the moon and feminine energy, and as a physical manifestation of silver, can be imbued with these spiritual significances. The promotion of colloidal silver in certain spiritual and alternative health media has bolstered its popularity. Influential figures like Amy Carlson heavily advocated for the use of colloidal silver, further cementing its place in certain spiritual and alternative health practices. The use of colloidal silver can lead to argyria, a condition in which silver particles deposit in the skin and organs, turning the skin a blue-gray color. And while it is most certainly snake oil, Carlson herself was a believer in its benefits and took heavy amounts of it, along with other illicit substances, at increasing frequency. As LoveHasWon continued to spread their messages via social media, Carlson began to appear less and less on camera. Followers expressed a concern of a mysterious cabal making metaphysical attempts to end their mother god, and that these attacks were affecting her health. Effects that she would attempt to overcome by increasing her intake of colloidal silver. These attacks would begin to occur more frequently, leaving Carlson bedridden with her devoted followers tending to her. In 2021, a member of the group made a concerning call to local Colorado law enforcement. In response, they would embark on a welfare check of the LoveHasWon compound, discovering a highly decomposed Amy Carlson in her room. Followers had decorated her body with Christmas lights and later would be determined to have enshrined the body in some morbid form of worship. Many members of the group would be arrested and taken into custody on charges related to abuse of a corpse, and with the presence of children on the compound, child abuse. Carlson's autopsy would reveal that she had been dead for weeks, with speculation that the eerie blue skin that her body was found to have had been caused by her continued use of colloidal silver. Ultimately, autopsy reports would later conclude that Carlson died of alcohol abuse, anorexia, and chronic ingestion of colloidal silver at the age of 45. Charges against the group members would be dropped later in the year, and LoveHasWon would splinter into several different groups, with some becoming disillusioned and leaving the lifestyle altogether. The discovery would spark a viral sensation, and the body cam footage is a haunting watch. Whispers and allegations of Carlson taking advantage of her followers would emerge both before and after the discovery. Mystery continues to surround LoveHasWon and Mother God, but as a modern-age example of the internet facilitating a sinister cult, it stands out to me as one of the more disturbing stories of cult activity, leaving me to wonder what the future has in store for us. Even with access to all of the science known to mankind, this group of impressionable people was lured in and taken advantage of by a single charismatic leader and a set of outlandish ideals. Are any of us really safe?
Does it strike y'all odd that she drinks so much?
No. I mean, you have to envision that she is the embodiment of Mother Earth. So if you were to meet Mother Earth in a physical vessel, which is Mom, she is in extreme amounts of pain.
If she's God, then wouldn't she just resolve that pain spiritually?
She can't escape anatomic contact.
In our modern age of information, we have the mind-blowing ability to reach the farthest corners of the planet socially. We have available to us an infinite amount of knowledge, dis and misinformation, and tools that would once have been thought of as magic. But in the right hands, they can be tools of control and disturbing levels of manipulation. I chose MamaMax and the crazy stories surrounding him and his actions to open this video because it was something that gripped me at every stage. From being a supporter to slowly learning of his ego-driven sins, I found myself nearly unable to break my attention from the event. As a naturally introspective person, situations like this will often have me lost in my own head, looking to identify ways that I ended up so enthralled. Was it the drama factor? Was it the charismatic coverage and seemingly endless well of content about it? Or was it my own ability to shoo away doubts when watching a video, largely trusting the information that is being broadcast by the creator? Whatever it was an unfortunate wake-up call to me that, at the end of the day, this is all mainly entertainment made by anyone with the skill and willpower to do so. If I can impart anything to you, it's this. Be vigilant with your mind and don't allow anyone else to pilot it for you. Investigate doubts instead of dismissing. And if you find yourself agreeing with every single thing someone is saying, audit yourself and make sure that you're not under the control of others, however minute the consequences may be. We are all forged in different fires, but we're here to move the world forward together. If we give up our ability to reason, then we'll all just end up as someone's pawn. If you've made it this far, thank you once again for letting me tell you a few stories. The sinister part of this video isn't quite the typical subject of death or destruction, but a psychological fear that I'm sure at least some of you have had. I wanted to present a video that was a little shorter than some of my other deep dives, so let me know how you felt about this one. If you liked the video, don't forget to like it. It helps a lot with getting these videos out to others. If you disliked it, then dislike it and tell me if you're so inclined. And remember to subscribe for more heavy metal and dark investigation content. If you wish to support further, you can become a member or join the Patreon. Everything in my life is kind of wobbly at the moment, so your support is appreciated in a way that I don't think I can express. The follow-up to this video is going to be a return to the Hawk and Load case files, but without the cringy name. If you liked this video, you might like my video on Satanic Panic. This is likely going to be the unofficial start of a series covering more sinister cults like the Branch Davidians, the Manson family, and plenty of others that will likely require their own videos. If there is a cult or a cult-like group that you would like to see me take on, please leave that in the comments. Remember to love your pets, and I'll catch you in the next video. Big Patreon and member shout out to Daniel, Gage, Jeremy, Leslie, Lisa, McLean, Richard, Ryan, Weapon Son Gaming, Craig, Dr. Spiderface, Christian, big shout out for Melissa, who is both a member and a patron, Ghost Dragon, who did all the music for this video, and of course my mommy.